Dust hangs like a veil over Copper Creek, a town where water and mercy run equally scarce. At the edge of the Blackwood Ranch stands a corral housing a beast more myth than horse. 18 hands of pure fury with eyes like burning coal. They call him Thunderclap, a Mustang so massive and wild he's left 2 men crippled for life. Clara Blackwood, the rancher's headstrong daughter, guards the beast with rifle and resolve, having promised her dying mother they'd never destroy what can't be tamed. When Miguel Reyes arrives, his Apache heritage written in the quiet way he moves and the knowing in his eyes, Clara gives her sternest warning. But some men listen to whispers others can't hear, and some horses carry destinies that can't be denied. Will a man who speaks the forgotten language of wild things break through where brute force has always failed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun climbed mercilessly over Copper Creek, beating down on parched land that hadn't seen proper rain in nearly 8 months. Clara Blackwood stood on the porch of the weathered ranch house, squinting at the horizon where heat waves danced like spirits above cracked earth. Her mother's journal lay open in her hands, the pages yellowed but the sketches still vivid. Wild horses running free across landscapes that no longer existed. Waters down another inch in the east well. Pete, the leathery old foreman, called as he crossed the yard. Won't last the month at this rate. Clara nodded, closing the journal with care. We'll deepen the north well tomorrow. Tell the men they can each have 1 extra cup for drinking, but the washing water stays rationed. At 32, Clara carried responsibility in the stern set of her shoulders and the perpetual furrow between her brows. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical braid. Her skin sun-darkened and hands calloused from work no rancher's daughter was supposed to do. Your father's asking for you, Pete added, his voice dropping. Clara's jaw tightened. Is he sober? Enough to form words. She tucked the journal into her pocket and headed inside to the darkened bedroom where Elijah Blackwood had retreated when his wife died and his spirit followed. The room smelled of stale whiskey and regret. The bank sent another notice, he mumbled from his bed. Harmon came by himself. I'll handle Harmon Wilcox, Clara said, opening the curtains despite her father's groan of protest. Like I handle everything else. That's no way to talk about the only man in this county with enough money to save this place, Elijah said, squinting at her. He still wants to marry you. And I still don't want to marry him, Clara replied evenly. We're not that desperate yet. Aren't we? Her father gestured weakly at the room, the house, the failing ranch beyond. That demon horse eats enough for 3 normal ones, and what good is he? Can't be ridden, can't be bred. Thunderclap stays. Clara cut him off. I promised Mother. Your mother's promises will be the end of this ranch, Elijah muttered, reaching for a bottle that wasn't there. Clara left without another word, striding across the yard toward the distant corral where Thunderclap paced. The massive black Mustang stood nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, his coat gleaming even in drought, his muscles rippling with barely contained power. Most horses grew docile with captivity. This one had only grown more dangerous. From the barn emerged 2 of the ranch hands, eyeing Clara cautiously. Miss Blackwood, the taller one called. Simmons from the Double Circle Ranch says they lost 4 more cattle to rustlers last night. Says to watch our north pasture. Post an extra man tonight, Clara ordered. We can't afford to lose a single head. As she approached Thunderclap's corral, the great horse stopped pacing and fixed her with eyes that burned with intelligence and fury. Clara respected that fury. In a land where everything and everyone eventually bent to the brutal demands of survival, Thunderclap remained unbroken. One day, she said softly to the horse, you'll understand I'm not your enemy. The horse snorted and turned away. Talking to that devil again? Harmon Wilcox's voice came from behind her. The banker sat atop his perfectly groomed chestnut gelding, dressed as if for a Sunday social despite the dust and heat. His mustache was precisely trimmed, his hat immaculate. One day that beast will be the death of someone on this ranch. He stays in his corral, People who get hurt are the ones who don't respect his space. Clara replied without turning. Like those two cowboys last spring? The Mitchell boy will never walk right again. That was his choice to enter with a whip. Harmon dismounted with the awkward movements of a man who rode for show rather than work. Clara, I've come with a generous offer. The bank can extend your loan if I finally agree to marry you, Clara finished for him. The answer hasn't changed, Harmon. It's a business arrangement that makes sense, he insisted, stepping closer. I have capital, you have land. Together we'd make a miserable pair. Clara cut him off. I'm not for sale, and neither is Blackwood Ranch. Harmon's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. Pride is expensive in times like these. That Mustang alone is worth good money to the Barker Brothers circus. They'd pay to display a killer horse. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her rifle. Get back on your horse, Harmon. He smiled thinly, retreating a step. I'm a patient man, Clara, but droughts have a way of changing minds. He mounted his horse with exaggerated dignity. I'll return next week. Perhaps by then you'll see reason. As he rode away, Clara turned back to Thunderclap, who watched her with those burning eyes. I won't let them take you, she promised softly. Not him, not anyone. In the distance, a plume of dust marked a rider approaching from town. Another problem, another demand on land that had nothing left to give. Miguel Reyes rode into Copper Creek with little more than what his dun mare could carry and the small medicine pouch tucked beneath his shirt. The town's single street stirred with afternoon activity. Men loading supplies, women gathering at the general store, children pausing their games to stare at the stranger. He felt their eyes tracking him, assessing the copper tone of his skin, the high cheekbones that spoke of his mother's Apache blood. The mare's hooves kicked up dust as Miguel dismounted outside the mercantile. Inside, conversations stuttered to silence as he entered. He kept his eyes low, his movements deliberate lessons learned across 38 years of straddling two worlds and belonging to neither. Help you? The storekeeper asked, voice clipped. Looking for work, Miguel replied, his voice quiet but clear. Heard Blackwood Ranch might be hiring. An older man spat into a brass spittoon. That place is dying slower than most. Girl running it is too stubborn to see it. Miguel nodded without comment, purchased jerky and coffee, then returned to his horse. As he adjusted his saddle, he felt the medicine pouch against his chest. His grandfather's voice seemed to whisper from it. In a foreign land, speak little and watch much. He'd been watching and speaking little since his grandfather died 3 winters past. The old man had been his bridge between worlds. Apache wisdom married to practical survival in a changing land. From him, Miguel had learned to listen to horses in ways few white men understood. You really heading to Blackwood? A boy of perhaps 12 had approached, staring openly at Miguel's mare, his worn boots, the simple but well-kept rifle. Yes, Miguel answered. They got a horse there, the boy said, eyes wide. Big as a house and mean as a wounded wolf. Killed a man last year and broke 2 others. Miguel's interest kindled. No horse kills for pleasure. This one might. They say it's got devil blood. The boy made a sign against evil. Miss Blackwood won't let anyone put it down on account of a promise to her dead mama. Miguel thanked the boy with a penny and mounted his mare. As he rode toward Blackwood Ranch, memories of his grandfather's teachings surfaced like stones in a riverbed. The white man breaks a horse to ride it, the old man had told him. Asterisk. Our people join with a horse to fly together. Asterisk. The landscape grew more desolate as he rode. Drought had stripped the land of mercy. Even the scrub looked defeated, the scattered cattle more bone than flesh. At the horizon, a smudge of buildings marked his destination. Blackwood Ranch had once been grand. That much was clear from the weathered 2-story house and the extensive outbuildings. Now it carried the air of faded glory, of stubborn resistance against inevitable decline. A man with skin like tanned leather watched Miguel approach from beside a barn. His hand rested near a holstered pistol. State your business, he called when Miguel was within earshot. Looking for work, Miguel replied, dismounting slowly. Good with horses. The man, Pete, Miguel would later learn, looked him over with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent a lifetime judging men's worth at a glance. We ain't hiring Indians, he said flatly. I'm half Mexican, Miguel replied without heat. And I don't just ride horses. I understand them. Pete snorted. Understanding don't feed cattle or fix fences. I can do that too. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a woman on horseback. Tall, straight-backed, with eyes sharp as a hawk's. Clara Blackwood pulled her mount to a stop and studied Miguel with undisguised suspicion. Who's this? She demanded of Pete. Says he's looking for work. Good with horses. Pete's tone made clear his opinion of such claims. Clara's gaze traveled over Miguel, taking in his worn clothes, his quiet stance, the mare that stood calmly behind him. We need someone who can rebuild the north fence line and help move the herd to higher pasture, she said. Not someone to play with horses. Miguel met her eyes directly. I can do both. Something in his steady gaze made her pause. Where are you from? South. Arizona Territory. Why come north during drought? Miguel touched the medicine pouch beneath his shirt. Sometimes the path chooses the traveler. Clara frowned at such mysticism. We pay $8 a week plus meals. Work starts at dawn. Ends when I say it ends. Pete here is foreman, you answer to him. Miguel nodded once. One more thing, Clara added, her voice hardening. There's a horse here, a black Mustang in the far corral. You don't go near him. Don't talk about him. Don't even look at him. 2 men are crippled because they thought they could tame him. I understand, Miguel said quietly. No, you don't, Clara countered. But if you break that rule, you'll be gone before your feet touch the ground. Clear? Clear. That evening, after being shown to a sparse bunkhouse and receiving curt introductions to the other ranch hands, Miguel slipped outside. The night was cool, the stars brilliant in the absence of clouds or moisture. He walked to the edge of the ranch compound and stood very still. In the distance, he could make out the shadowy form of a large corral. Within it moved something massive and dark. Restless, powerful. Miguel didn't need to see more. He could feel the horse's presence like a storm on the horizon. His grandfather would have said some spirits cannot be tamed. They can only be understood, respected, joined with in mutual purpose. Miguel touched his medicine pouch and whispered an Apache prayer to the night winds. Dawn painted the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold as Miguel joined the other ranch hands. Clara stood on the porch, issuing directions with the precision of a military commander. The men received their assignments with nods and scattered to their tasks. When Miguel's turn came, Clara's gaze was cool and assessing. North fence line with Jeb, she said. He'll show you where the supplies are. Miguel nodded once and turned to follow a lanky, weathered man who'd already started walking toward the barn. And Reyes, Clara called after him. Those fancy ideas about understanding horses, save them for somewhere else. Here we need workers, not dreamers. The day unfolded in a rhythm of physical labor. Miguel worked steadily alongside Jeb, who spoke little but watched much. They repaired fence posts broken by desperate cattle seeking greener pastures beyond Blackwood land. By midday, Miguel's shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands blistered despite their calluses. You work hard, Jeb commented during their brief break. The closest thing to approval Miguel was likely to receive. Most drifters quit by noon first day. Miguel took a careful sip from his canteen. Water was precious here. He'd noticed how everyone on the ranch measured their consumption with unconscious precision. Not my first drought, he replied. Jeb nodded toward the direction of the ranch house. Won't be your last if you stay here. Miss Clara's determined, but even determination can't make it rain. The land remembers, Miguel said quietly. Drought passes. Jeb gave him an odd look. That Indian talk? Miguel didn't answer, just returned to working on the fence line. When they returned to the ranch at dusk, Miguel took care of his mare first, then helped with the remaining chores. He observed how the other men moved, their efficiency born of habit and necessity. No wasted motion, no wasted water, no wasted words. After the simple dinner of beans and cornbread, Miguel retreated to the quiet behind the bunkhouse. From his saddlebag he removed a wooden flute, hand-carved by his grandfather decades ago. The instrument was smooth with age and use, the wood darkened by the oils of many hands. Miguel turned it in his fingers, remembering. His grandfather had played for wild horses, drawing them near with melodies that spoke of freedom and understanding rather than capture. Music speaks what words cannot, the old man had taught him. Horses hear truth in the spaces between notes. Making his decision, Miguel walked quietly toward the distant corral, staying downwind and in shadow. The moon provided just enough light to navigate. He settled behind a stack of hay bales 20 yards from where the great black Mustang paced restlessly. Thunderclap sensed him immediately. The massive horse stopped pacing, head high, nostrils flaring. Miguel remained motionless, offering no threat, making no demands. After long minutes, the Mustang resumed his movement, though his ears remained fixed in Miguel's direction. Miguel raised the flute to his lips and began to play. The melody was soft, almost below the threshold of human hearing. A lullaby his Apache grandmother had sung, notes that rose and fell like breathing. He played not to the horse but to the night itself, allowing the music to float on the cool air. Thunderclap stopped again. His head turned fully toward Miguel, eyes reflecting moonlight. The horse made no aggressive move, just listened with the entire body as horses do. Miguel played for perhaps 15 minutes before lowering the flute. He made no attempt to approach the corral. There would be time for that. Tonight was for introduction only, for Thunderclap to associate his scent and sound with peace rather than threat. As Miguel rose to leave, a movement near the ranch house caught his eye. A silhouette in a doorway, Clara Blackwood, watching. How long she had been there, he couldn't guess. He nodded once in her direction, acknowledging her presence. She remained motionless for a moment, then stepped back inside, the door closing firmly behind her. The following days established a pattern. Miguel worked from dawn until dusk, proving his worth through action rather than words. He rebuilt fences, moved cattle to better grazing, repaired a windmill pump that had stood useless for months. The other ranch hands gradually accepted his presence, if not his difference. Each night he visited Thunderclap, never approaching the corral directly, always with the flute. Sometimes he played. Sometimes he simply sat in silence, allowing the horse to grow accustomed to his presence. And each night, at some point, he would sense Clara watching from a distance. On the 5th night, as Miguel put away his flute and prepared to return to the bunkhouse, Clara stepped from the shadows. "I told you to stay away from that horse," she said, her voice low but sharp. "I haven't entered his corral," Miguel replied calmly. "You know what I meant." She moved closer, moonlight catching the angles of her face. "What are you doing with that instrument?" "Introducing myself." Clara's laugh held no humor. "To a horse. To a spirit that happens to wear a horse's body." She stared at him for a long moment. "My father would fire you for such nonsense." "But you won't," Miguel said, a statement rather than a question. Clara stared at Miguel, annoyed by his quiet confidence. "No, I won't fire you," she admitted. "Good workers are too hard to find. But my rules stand." She turned to leave, then paused. "Whatever you think you're doing with that horse, it won't work. Better men have tried." "Perhaps that was the problem," Miguel replied softly. "They tried too hard." Clara shook her head and walked away, boots crunching on the dry ground. Back in her father's study, she slumped into the worn leather chair behind the desk. The ranch's ledger lay open, columns of figures that refused to balance. Water was scarce, grass scarcer, and their cattle were growing dangerously thin. An empty whiskey bottle sat on her father's desk, the 3rd this week. She picked it up, considered hurling it against the wall, then set it down with controlled precision. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with the banknote coming due in 6 weeks. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Pete entered, hat in hand, never a good sign. The Carson Creek water rights meeting didn't go well, he said without preamble. Harrington's ranch got most of the remaining flow. Said they got more cattle, so they need more water. They have more cattle because they haven't lost any to rustlers, Clara replied bitterly. And because their banker isn't trying to force them under. Pete's weathered face creased with concern. Miss Clara, maybe it's time to consider. I'm not selling to Harmon Wilcox, she cut him off, or anyone else. There's the circus offer for the Mustang, Pete ventured. $500 is good money. Thunderclap stays. Clara's tone left no room for argument. Pete sighed. Your father's asking for you. He heard about the water rights. Clara found her father sitting on the edge of his bed, more lucid than he'd been in days. The room smelled of sweat and regret. We're losing, aren't we? Elijah Blackwood asked, his once commanding voice now thin. Clara sat beside him, suddenly aware of how frail he'd become. We're having a rough stretch. Don't lie to me, girl. I taught you better. He rubbed his face with trembling hands. Your mother would be ashamed of what I've become. She'd understand, Clara said, though she wasn't sure it was true. Sarah Blackwood had been as strong as the land itself, until illness had taken her 3 years ago, leaving Clara to manage both ranch and father. Harmon came by again, Elijah said. When you were out with the herd. Clara stiffened. What did he want? Same as always. To marry you and merge the properties. He paused. He mentioned other options too. What options? Elijah wouldn't meet her eyes. Said if I signed over 10 acres along the creek bed, he could extend our loan another 6 months. You didn't? Clara said, dread pooling in her stomach. Her father's silence was answer enough. That creek bed is our only reliable water source in drought. Clara stood, anger breaking through her control. How could you? He said we keep water rights, Elijah protested weakly. And you believed him? The man who's been trying to take our land for years. Clara stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Outside, the night air did little to cool her fury. She strode toward the barn, needing movement, action, anything to burn off the helpless rage. Inside, she found Miguel repairing a saddle by lantern light. He looked up as she entered but said nothing, sensing her mood. Don't you sleep? She demanded. When necessary. He set aside his work. Something's happened. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. My father signed away part of our land to Harmon Wilcox, our best water source. Miguel nodded slowly. The banker who visits. The banker who wants everything we have. Clara paced the length of the barn. He's been picking at us like a vulture, waiting for us to fail. Why not sell to someone else? Because this land has been in my mother's family for 3 generations, Clara replied. She made me promise to keep it, to never let it be broken up and parceled out. And the horse? Thunderclap. Clara stopped pacing. He was my mother's project. She found him as a colt next to his dead mother after a lightning storm. That's why she named him Thunderclap. Everyone said to put him down, that a wild Mustang that size would never be tamed. But she insisted he had a special spirit. Miguel's eyes held no judgment, only interest. Clara found herself continuing. Before she died, she made me swear to protect him. Said someday the right person would come along who could understand him. She laughed bitterly. 3 years later, all he's done is cause trouble and eat enough for 3 normal horses. Yet you keep your promise, Miguel observed. For all the good it's doing us. Clara moved to the barn door, staring out at the starlit ranch. One more bad month and promises won't matter anyway. Miguel joined her at the doorway, his presence solid but undemanding. My grandfather taught that a horse carries the spirit of the land it runs on. Perhaps your mother saw something in Thunderclap that others missed. Sounds like more Indian mysticism, Clara said, but there was less edge to her voice. Perhaps, Miguel agreed, or perhaps just wisdom that comes from listening instead of commanding. For a moment they stood in silence, shoulders nearly touching, looking out at the struggling ranch. Clara felt an unexpected comfort in his quiet presence. Dawn comes early, she finally said, stepping away. Good night, Mr. Reyes. Miguel, he corrected gently. Clara hesitated, then nodded once. Miguel. The drought tightened its grip on Copper Creek like a slowly constricting snake. A week after Clara discovered her father's deal with Harmon, Pete announced that the south well had dried up completely. The ranch hands gathered around the remaining wells, faces grim as they drew what little water remained. Half rations for everything except the breeding stock, Clara ordered, her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her throat. The cattle in the north pasture will have to be moved closer to the creek. That puts them on Wilcox's new property, Jeb pointed out. We still have water rights, Clara replied, though doubt shadowed her words. For now. As the men dispersed to their tasks, Clara noticed Miguel lingering near the well. He approached her with measured steps, carrying his canteen. I'd like permission to try something with the Mustang, he said without preamble. Clara frowned. I thought we settled this. You settled it, Miguel replied. I listened. Despite herself, Clara almost smiled at his calm persistence. What did you have in mind? Water sharing, Miguel said, holding up his canteen. Building trust through necessity. Clara studied him, noting the quiet confidence in his stance. In the 2 weeks since his arrival, Miguel had proven himself a skilled worker and a calming presence among the increasingly anxious ranch hands. Even Pete had begun to defer to his judgment on certain matters. You think bribing Thunderclap with water will make him trust you? She asked skeptically. Not bribing. Sharing. Miguel's eyes held hers. There's a difference. Clara sighed, knowing she should refuse but finding herself curious. Don't get within striking distance. That horse can kick through a fence post when he's angry. Miguel nodded once and walked away, his movements unhurried and deliberate. Clara watched him go, then turned her attention back to the day's overwhelming list of tasks. Hours later, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Clara found herself drawn to Thunderclap's corral. She told herself she was checking on the Mustang's water trough, a legitimate concern in this drought, but knew she was really looking for Miguel. She found him sitting cross-legged on the ground, about 10 feet from the corral fence. Thunderclap stood at the far end of the enclosure, massive head raised, watching Miguel with wary attention. Between them, just inside the fence line, sat Miguel's canteen, its cap removed. Neither man nor horse moved. The only sound was the hot wind sifting through the sparse grass. Clara remained still, understanding instinctively that any interruption would break whatever delicate connection was forming. Minutes passed. Thunderclap snorted once, pawing at the dry earth. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, the giant Mustang approached the fence. Miguel remained motionless as the horse drew near the canteen. Thunderclap stretched his neck, nostrils flaring at the scent of water. With surprising delicacy for such a massive creature, he drank from the small container. Only when the horse had finished and stepped back did Miguel move. With the same unhurried grace, he stood, retrieved the empty canteen, and walked away without looking back at the horse or acknowledging Clara's presence. That night, Clara sat on her mother's old rocking chair on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The day's worries pressed on her. Dwindling water, weakening cattle, mounting debts. Yet her thoughts kept returning to the scene at the corral. The soft creak of floorboards announced Miguel's approach. He carried 2 cups of coffee, offering one to Clara without speaking. She accepted it with a nod of thanks. How did you know he would drink from your canteen? She asked after a comfortable silence. I didn't, Miguel replied, leaning against the porch railing. But thirst is a powerful teacher. You've done this before. Miguel sipped his coffee. My grandfather believed that to understand any creature, you must first recognize its needs. Then meet those needs without demanding anything in return. Sounds inefficient, Clara observed, though without criticism. It takes time, Miguel agreed. But what is built slowly often stands longer. They drank their coffee as night settled fully around them. In the distance, coyotes called to one another across the parched landscape. He's not wild because he hates, Miguel said softly. He's wild because he fears. Clara turned to study his profile in the dim light. Thunderclap. All creatures who fight hardest are fighting fear. His eyes met hers. Even people. The observation hit closer to home than Clara cared to admit. She looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. What does he have to fear from us? She asked. He's fed, watered, protected. But not free, Miguel replied. And not understood. Clara thought of her mother spending hours by the corral, sketching the great horse, talking to him as if he could comprehend her words. Clara Blackwood had seen something in Thunderclap that others missed. Perhaps the same thing Miguel seemed to see. My mother would have liked you, Clara said, surprising herself with the admission. Miguel accepted this with a slight nod. From what you've said, I would have respected her greatly. She was stubborn, Clara continued, a sad smile touching her lips. Father called her the most beautiful force of nature he'd ever encountered. Nothing could change her mind once it was set. Like her daughter, Miguel observed. Clara didn't deny it. The ranch was everything to her. Even when she was dying, her concerns were for the land, the animals. She paused. Especially Thunderclap. A promise to the dying carries special weight, Miguel said. My people believe such promises bind the living to the spirit world. Do you believe that? Clara asked. Miguel touched the medicine pouch at his chest. I believe that some bonds transcend understanding. A comfortable silence fell between them. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt the tight knot of anxiety in her chest loosen slightly. There was something about Miguel's presence that brought calm. A steadiness that reminded her of the deep aquifers that survived even the worst droughts. Tomorrow I'm riding to town, she said finally. Coming with me? Miguel raised an eyebrow in question. We need supplies, Clara explained, and I need to have words with Harmon Wilcox about our water rights. Then I'll come, Miguel replied simply, though bankers rarely respond well to truth. Clara almost smiled. That's why I'm bringing you. To keep me from saying what I really think. Clara's sleep had grown increasingly restless as the ranch's troubles mounted. That night was no exception. Near midnight, she abandoned her bed and moved to her mother's rocking chair by the window. The moon cast silver light across the drought-stricken land, transforming it into something almost beautiful in its desolation. Movement caught her eye. A solitary figure walking toward Thunderclap's corral. Miguel. Clara wasn't surprised. His nighttime visits to the Mustang had become a ritual, one she'd stopped trying to prevent. She watched as he settled into his customary spot near the corral. The great horse approached the fence more quickly now, with less hesitation than before. In the moonlight, Clara could see Miguel's lips moving. Not singing this time, but speaking. The words didn't carry to her window, but their cadence did. A gentle rhythm like water over stones. Thunderclap stood perfectly still, massive head lowered to Miguel's level, ears forward in intense concentration. The sight stirred something in Clara, a memory of her mother sitting in this same chair, telling her, animals understand more than we credit them for. They hear the heart behind the words. Clara must have dozed in the chair, for when she opened her eyes again, Miguel was gone from the corral. Thunderclap remained at the fence, looking toward the bunkhouse as if waiting for his return. The next morning, Clara and Miguel rode toward town side by side. She noted how his mare moved with relaxed confidence beside her more spirited gelding. What do you say to him? Clara asked abruptly. To Thunderclap at night. If Miguel was surprised by her question, he didn't show it. Stories, mostly. Stories. About the mountains where I grew up. About horses I've known. He adjusted his hat against the morning sun. My grandfather taught that horses understand the meaning behind words, even if the words themselves mean nothing to them. And what meaning are you trying to convey? Miguel was quiet for a moment. That not all men bring pain. That trust is possible. They rode in silence for a while, dust rising from their horses' hooves. My mother used to talk to him too, Clara said finally. I thought it was foolishness. And now, Clara shrugged. Now I'm letting a half Apache horse talker visit him nightly. So clearly my judgment is questionable. The hint of a smile touched Miguel's lips. Perhaps wisdom is recognizing when to question our judgments. Copper Creek came into view, a cluster of buildings shimmering in the heat. As they rode down the main street, Clara noticed how conversations paused and eyes tracked their progress. She was accustomed to the attention. The female rancher was always subject to scrutiny. But today she saw how much of that attention focused on Miguel. "They're not used to Indians in town," she said quietly. "They're not used to Indians who ride beside the rancher's daughter," Miguel corrected. At the general store, Clara dismounted and handed her reins to Miguel. "I'll get supplies. Then we'll pay our visit to the bank." Inside, Clara was greeted with strained politeness by Mrs. Parker, the proprietor's wife. "Brave of you to bring that one to town," the woman said, nodding toward the window where Miguel waited with the horses. "Mr. Reyes is my employee," Clara replied evenly. "There's talk," Mrs. Parker continued, measuring coffee beans with deliberate slowness, "about him spending time with that devil horse of yours, using Indian magic." Clara fought to keep her expression neutral. "There's always talk in a small town, Mrs. Parker. Rarely much truth to it." The woman sniffed. "Harmon Wilcox says that Mustang should be put down after what it did to the Mitchell boy. Says it's a danger." "Mr. Wilcox is welcome to his opinion," Clara said, counting out coins for her purchases. "As am I." Outside, she found Miguel surrounded by 3 local cowboys. Their postures radiated hostility, though they maintained a cautious distance. "Heard you're some kind of horse whisperer," one was saying as Clara approached. "Think you can tame the Blackwood devil horse?" "I don't tame horses," Miguel replied, his voice calm. "I understand them." The tallest cowboy spat tobacco juice near Miguel's boot. "Understanding don't stop 2,000 pounds of fury from crushing your skull." "Neither does a whip," Miguel replied, "as others have discovered." The cowboy stepped forward, hand moving to his belt. "You suggesting I don't know how to handle a horse, Indian?" "That's enough, Vance," Clara interrupted, handing her packages to Miguel. "Mr. Reyes works for me, and we have business at the bank." The cowboys exchanged glances but backed away. Vance tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Miss Blackwood, always a pleasure. My offer to break that Mustang still stands. $20 says I can ride him by sundown." "Your funeral would cost more than that," Clara replied coolly. "And I'm not interested in burying anyone else on my property." She led Miguel toward the bank, aware of the eyes following them. "Sorry about that," she said under her breath. "Vance Hollister fancies himself the best horseman in the county. Men who boast of control rarely possess it," Miguel observed. The bank occupied the most imposing building in Copper Creek, a 2-story structure with actual glass windows and a painted sign. Inside, a clerk directed them to Harmon Wilcox's private office with obvious reluctance. Harmon rose as they entered, his smile faltering slightly at the sight of Miguel. "Clara, what a pleasant surprise." His eyes flicked to Miguel. "I wasn't aware you were bringing company." "Mr. Reyes is my ranch foreman now," Clara said, the promotion spontaneous but deliberate. She saw Miguel's slight surprise from the corner of her eye. "Indeed," Harmon gestured to chairs. "How progressive of you." "We're here about the water rights to the creek bed property," Clara said, remaining standing. "The document my father signed guaranteed continued access." Of course. Harmon's smile didn't reach his eyes, though I believe the exact wording was reasonable access during normal conditions. And, well, my dear, these are hardly normal conditions. Drought changes everything. Clara felt heat rise in her face. "You know very well that without that water our cattle will suffer," Harmon finished, his tone falsely sympathetic. "As will you and your father. It's unfortunate, truly. But perhaps this difficult situation presents an opportunity to reconsider my offer." "Which offer would that be?" Clara asked coldly. "To buy our land at half its value or to marry me and take it for nothing?" Harmon's expression hardened. You've always had a sharp tongue, Clara. Your mother's influence, no doubt. He glanced at Miguel, who stood silently observing. I wonder what your father would think of your new appointment. My father authorized me to make all ranch decisions, Clara replied. Did he? Harmon opened a drawer in his desk and removed a folded paper. When he was here last week, he seemed quite amenable to my guidance. Clara snatched the paper from his hand and unfolded it. Her stomach dropped as she read the contents. A preliminary agreement to sell another 15 acres, including the south pasture. He had no right, she whispered. He had every right, Harmon countered smoothly. The ranch is still in his name, after all. Miguel stepped forward, his movement drawing both their attention. The document isn't signed, he observed quietly. Harmon's smile tightened. For now, Elijah promised to return tomorrow to finalize it. Clara refolded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. My father won't be coming to town tomorrow or any day soon. His health doesn't permit it. Then I'll happily visit him at the ranch, Harmon replied. As a concerned friend. We're leaving, Clara said, turning toward the door. And Mr. Wilcox? Stay off Blackwood land. Outside, Clara mounted her horse with shaking hands. Miguel joined her silently, waiting until they were beyond the town limits before speaking. He's systematically dismantling your ranch, he observed. Like a vulture picking at a dying animal, Clara agreed bitterly. And my father is helping him. They rode in silence for several minutes, dust swirling around their horses' hooves. There was a wanted poster in the sheriff's office window, Miguel said finally. With my name on it. Clara's head snapped toward him. What? From Arizona Territory. Claiming I stole horses from the military at Fort Apache. Did you? Miguel met her gaze steadily. No. Clara studied him, then nodded once. I believe you. The sheriff may not. Copper Creek's sheriff is Harmon's cousin, Clara said. This has his fingerprints all over it. When they arrived back at the ranch, Clara found her father more lucid than he'd been in weeks, sitting on the porch with an actual cup of coffee instead of whiskey. Where have you been? He demanded. Pete's been looking for you. Says we've got rustlers hitting the North Range. Clara dismounted wearily. We were in town, trying to salvage what's left of our water rights after you signed them away. Elijah Blackwood had the grace to look ashamed. Harmon said. I don't care what Harmon said. Clara cut him off. He's lying to you, using you, and you're letting him because it's easier than standing up and being the man this ranch needs. Her father flinched as if struck. For a moment, Clara regretted her harshness, then hardened her resolve. Too much was at stake for gentleness. Harmon showed us another agreement, she continued. For the south pasture. Were you going to tell me before or after you signed it? It's just land, Elijah said weakly. Land can be replaced. Not this land, Clara replied. Mother's land. Our home. She turned to Miguel, who had been standing quietly nearby. Check with Pete about the rustlers. I'll join you shortly. After Miguel left, Clara sat beside her father. I'm putting the ranch in my name, she said quietly, before you can sign away anything else. Clara. No, she cut him off. You have a choice. Stop drinking and help me save this place, or continue as you are and lose all say in its future. She left him on the porch, his face a mask of shame and resentment. In the barn, she found Miguel and Pete in conversation. 3 cattle taken last night, Pete reported grimly. Clean work. They knew exactly where to hit us and when. Someone with local knowledge, Miguel suggested. Or someone working with locals, Clara added, thinking of Harmon's smug face. We'll double the night watch. No one rides alone, especially near the property lines. As they discussed security arrangements, Vance Hollister rode into the yard with 2 companions. Clara stepped outside, Miguel following like a shadow. Afternoon, Miss Blackwood, Vance called. Come to take you up on that wager. What wager? Clara asked, though she already knew. $20 says I can ride that devil horse of yours. Vance grinned, clearly having fortified his courage with whiskey. My boys here are witnesses. I never agreed to any wager, Clara replied. And Thunderclap isn't for riding. Scared I'll succeed where your Indian failed? Vance dismounted, swaggering slightly. Or maybe you're sweet on him. They say he visits that horse every night, playing love songs on his little flute. His companions laughed, one making a crude gesture. Clara felt Miguel tense beside her but marveled at his restraint. Mr. Hollister, she said coldly, you're drunk, trespassing, and insulting my employees. I suggest you leave before. Before what? Vance stepped closer, alcohol fueling his bravado. Before your half-breed foreman defends your honor? I'd like to see that. Miguel remained motionless, his expression unreadable. Clara had witnessed enough bar fights to recognize the dangerous undercurrents, how quickly this could escalate into violence. $20 is a lot of money these days, she said, changing tactics. You must be very confident in your abilities. Best horseman in 3 counties. Vance boasted. That Mustang just needs a firm hand. Clara appeared to consider. Tell you what, come back tomorrow when you're sober. If you still want to try, we can discuss it. Vance squinted at her suspiciously. Why the change of heart? Because right now you'd break your fool neck, Clara replied bluntly. And I've enough trouble without a dead cowboy on my property. Vance considered Clara's words, swaying slightly. Tomorrow then, noon sharp. He jabbed a finger at Miguel. And keep your witch doctor away from that horse tonight. Want him good and wild for a real man to break. After the cowboys departed in a cloud of dust and bravado, Clara turned to Miguel. You didn't say a word. Would words have improved the situation? He asked simply. Clara shook her head, admiring his restraint. Probably not. Vance has been looking for a fight since he was 12. He'll get one tomorrow, Miguel observed. Not from me. From Thunderclap. You think he'll actually come back? Men like that live on pride and the eyes of others, Miguel replied. He'll come. They walked together toward the corral where Thunderclap paced, agitated by the commotion. The great horse snorted at their approach, tossing his massive head. He senses the tension, Miguel said. Clara watched the Mustang's powerful movements. I've seen what he can do to a man. If Vance tries to ride him, that would be Vance's choice, Miguel pointed out. And its consequences. Clara studied Miguel's calm profile. You've never once asked to ride him. Because he's not ready. And if he never is? Miguel shrugged. Then that is his choice too. That evening, Harmon Wilcox arrived at the ranch, his buggy raising dust visible from half a mile away. Clara met him in the yard, rifle conspicuously in hand. You're not welcome here, she said as he stepped down from his vehicle. Harmon straightened his vest, unperturbed. I've come to speak with your father about our arrangement. Any arrangement you made with him while he was drinking is invalid, Clara stated flatly. The bank might disagree, Harmon replied smoothly, removing a silver-handled pistol from his coat pocket. The weapon gleamed expensively in the fading light, for show rather than use. This is still legally his property, Clara. You can't stop me from speaking with him. My father is indisposed. Drunk, you mean? Harmon smiled without warmth. All the more reason our discussion can't wait. The ranch is failing, Clara. You know it, I know it, everyone in the county knows it. I'm offering a lifeline. You're offering a noose, Clara countered. Harmon sighed dramatically. So stubborn. Just like your mother. He glanced toward the house. I'll only need a few minutes of Elijah's time. Whatever you have to say, you can say to me. Very well. Harmon's tone hardened. The bank is calling in your loan. You have 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure. Clara felt as though she'd been punched. You can't do that. We have 6 months left on the term. Read the fine print, my dear. The bank can accelerate payment if it determines the property value has significantly deteriorated, or if there's evidence of mismanagement. He gestured broadly at the drought-stricken ranch. Both conditions apply. "This is theft," Clara said, her voice shaking with anger. "This is business," Harmon corrected. "Though there is an alternative." He stepped closer. "Marry me, Clara. The loan disappears. The ranch stays in the family, and you don't have to watch everything your parents built crumble to dust." Before Clara could respond, the front door opened. Elijah Blackwood stood there, steadier than she'd seen him in months. "That's enough, Harmon," he called. "Get off my property." Harmon turned in surprise. "Elijah, good to see you vertical. I was just explaining to your daughter." "I heard what you were explaining," Elijah interrupted, walking stiffly down the porch steps. "And I'm not signing anything else." "Clara's right, you've been using me." Harmon's pleasant mask slipped. "Don't be a fool, Elijah. This drought won't end before your money does. I'm offering you a dignified way out." "There's nothing dignified about what you're doing," Elijah replied. "Sarah would be ashamed of me for even considering your offers." "Sarah is dead," Harmon said coldly. "And soon her precious ranch will be too." Clara stepped between them. "You've said your piece. Now leave." Harmon returned his pistol to his pocket. 30 days, Clara. Then everything you're fighting for belongs to the bank." He climbed back into his buggy, adding, "Oh, and you might want to ask your new foreman about those horses stolen from Fort Apache. Sheriff's quite interested in speaking with him." After Harmon departed, Clara turned to her father in surprise. "That's the most backbone you've shown in years." Elijah looked suddenly older, the brief strength fading. "Too little, too late, I'm afraid." "Maybe not," Clara said. "We still have 30 days. To find money we don't have? For a drought that won't end." He shook his head sadly. "I failed you, Clara. Failed Sarah. Failed everything that mattered." "Not yet," Clara insisted. "Not as long as we're still fighting." Later that night, Clara found herself once again watching from her window as Miguel approached Thunderclap's corral. The moon illuminated the scene with silver clarity. This time, the great horse came immediately to the fence, lowering his massive head toward Miguel's outstretched hand. For the first time, Miguel actually touched the Mustang, fingers brushing gently across Thunderclap's broad forehead. The horse allowed the contact for several seconds before stepping back, but he didn't retreat to the far side of the corral as he once would have. Clara felt her breath catch at this visible sign of progress. The man everyone underestimated, the horse everyone feared, finding common ground in the quiet darkness. She made her decision then. Pulling on her boots, she slipped quietly downstairs and out into the night. Clara approached quietly, conscious of the delicate balance between man and horse. Miguel heard her anyway, turning slightly without making any sudden movements. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "It's my ranch," Clara replied, equally quiet. "My horse." Miguel nodded once, accepting this. Thunderclap had retreated a few steps at Clara's arrival, but remained closer than usual, his eyes reflecting moonlight like dark fire. "He let you touch him," Clara observed, stopping several feet away. "A beginning," Miguel agreed. "Nothing more." They stood in companionable silence, the night sounds of the ranch surrounding them, distant cattle lowing, the creak of windmill vanes, the whisper of sparse grass in the light breeze. "Harmon's calling in our loan," Clara said finally. 30 days before we lose everything." Miguel absorbed this information without visible reaction. "You believe this is connected to the rustling?" "I believe Harmon Wilcox would burn down his own house if he thought he could collect the insurance and buy mine from the ashes," Clara said bitterly. "What will you do?" Clara sighed, suddenly feeling the weight of the day. "Fight. What else can I do? This land is all I have left of my mother. All that matters." "Is it?" Miguel asked, his quiet question hanging in the night air. Before Clara could respond, the first fat drops of rain splattered against the dust. They both looked up in surprise at the dark clouds that had gathered unnoticed during their conversation. "Rain," Clara whispered, almost afraid to believe it. The drops increased rapidly, turning into a steady downpour within seconds. Clara tilted her face upward, feeling the blessed moisture against her skin, tasting it on her lips. Miguel stood motionless beside her, water streaming down his face and darkening his shirt. Thunderclap raised his head and snorted at the sky, then began to prance excitedly around his corral, tail raised, hooves kicking up newly forming mud. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed almost immediately by a boom of thunder that Clara felt in her chest. The storm had arrived with stunning suddenness, the way they sometimes did after long drought, as if the sky had finally broken open all at once. "We need to check the herd," Clara shouted over the increasing downpour. Flash floods. Her words were cut off by another thunderclap, this one directly overhead. In the corral, Thunderclap reared up in response, his massive form silhouetted against the lightning-illuminated sky. When his hooves came down, they struck the fence with tremendous force, splintering one of the posts. "The corral won't hold him if he panics," Miguel said, already moving toward the damaged section. Clara ran to help, rain plastering her clothes to her body, mud sucking at her boots. Together they braced the broken post, but another lightning strike sent Thunderclap charging at the weakened section. Wood cracked and gave way beneath his weight. "Get back!" Miguel shouted, pushing Clara aside as the Mustang burst through the opening. Clara expected the horse to flee, to run wild and free after 3 years of confinement. Instead, Thunderclap stopped just outside the corral, tossing his great head in the rain as if uncertain what to do with his newfound freedom. Miguel slowly straightened, making no move to recapture the horse. He simply stood, rain streaming down his face, and began to hum, the same melody Clara had heard him play on the flute. Incredibly, Thunderclap didn't bolt. He pawed the muddy ground, snorted at the storm, but remained nearby, circling Miguel and Clara at a cautious distance. "He's staying," Clara whispered in disbelief. "For now," Miguel replied. "But we should secure the other animals. This storm is just beginning." The rain intensified as they ran toward the barn, where the other horses were whinnying in distress. Inside, they found controlled chaos. Nervous animals, a leaking roof, and a section of wall where the wind had torn away boards. "I'll handle this," Miguel said. "Check on your father and the bunkhouse." Clara nodded and dashed back into the storm. She found her father awake and surprisingly sober, already organizing the ranch hands to secure loose items and move vulnerable cattle to higher ground. For the next several hours, they worked in the punishing rain. Clara moved between groups, directing efforts, reinforcing fences, diverting sudden streams that threatened to flood the root cellar. The drought-hardened earth couldn't absorb the deluge, creating instant rivers where there had been only dust. Throughout it all, Thunderclap remained on the ranch property, sometimes visible through the rain, sometimes hidden, but never fleeing. He followed at a distance as Miguel helped lead stranded cattle to safety, watching as if studying human behavior for the first time. Near dawn, as the storm finally began to ease, Clara found herself taking shelter under a massive oak tree with Miguel. They were both soaked to the skin, exhausted, mud-splattered, but exhilarated by the life-giving rain and the crisis weathered. "You were right," Clara said, watching rainwater stream off the brim of her hat. "About what?" "Thunderclap. He could have run, but he stayed." She looked at Miguel curiously. "Why?" "Because freedom isn't just about absence of barriers," Miguel replied. "It's about choosing where you belong." The simple wisdom of his words struck Clara deeply. In the dim pre-dawn light, with rain dripping from the oak leaves above them, Miguel seemed to embody something her mother had always tried to teach her. That strength came in many forms, not just in domination and control. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face. The strong lines, the quiet dignity, the eyes that saw more than others. Clara felt something shift inside her, like ground giving way after rain. Without fully intending to, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, almost tentative, yet it sent warmth coursing through her rain-chilled body. When she pulled back, Miguel's expression was unreadable in the darkness. For a moment, Clara feared she had misunderstood everything between them. Then his hand rose to gently touch her cheek, and he leaned forward to return the kiss. Deeper this time, a promise rather than a question. A crash of thunder directly overhead made them spring apart. The old oak above them groaned, and with a terrible splintering sound, a massive branch came crashing down mere feet from where they stood. They stared at the fallen limb, then at each other. In the distance, Thunderclap's distinctive whinny carried through the lessening rain. "I think," Miguel said with the hint of a smile, "the storm is trying to tell us something." Dawn broke over Blackwood Ranch with a clarity rarely seen during drought times. The storm had washed the air clean, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Muddy and battered, but renewed. Water filled ditches and collected in every depression, precious moisture soaking into the parched earth. Clara stood on the porch, nursing a cup of coffee, surveying the damage and blessings the storm had delivered in equal measure. Several outbuildings had lost sections of roof, fences were down in multiple places, and the main corral would need complete rebuilding. But the wells would recharge, the grass would grow, and the cattle would drink their fill for the first time in months. And Thunderclap was free. The great horse had remained on Blackwood land throughout the night, sometimes visible on the ridge overlooking the ranch, sometimes disappearing into the gullies only to reappear elsewhere. Clara had expected Miguel to attempt to recapture him, but he had made no move to do so. As if summoned by her thoughts, Miguel appeared from the direction of the barn, carrying something in his hands. Drawing closer, Clara saw it was a halter. Not the heavy, reinforced type they'd unsuccessfully used on Thunderclap before, but something lighter, hand-braided from soft leather. "You made that?" she asked as he joined her on the porch. Miguel nodded. "Last night after the storm." "For Thunderclap?" When he nodded again, she frowned. "You think he'll let you put that on him? He's free now." "Freedom is about choice," Miguel replied, "not absence of connection." Clara studied him over the rim of her coffee cup, remembering their kiss beneath the oak tree. Neither had mentioned it since, but it lingered between them like a changed weather pattern, unseen but undeniably present. "Vance and his friends will be here at noon," she reminded him. "Still think he'll try to ride Thunderclap?" "If his pride demands it," Miguel replied, "though it may be harder now to catch what isn't contained." As they spoke, movement on the ridge caught their attention. Thunderclap stood silhouetted against the morning sky, his powerful form unmistakable even at a distance. He seemed to be watching the ranch, head high, mane catching the early light. "He's beautiful," Clara murmured. "Yes," Miguel agreed. "And now he chooses whether to stay or go." The ranch gradually came to life around them as the hands emerged to assess damage and resume chores. Clara's father appeared, looking haggard but clear-eyed, and joined them on the porch. "Thought that beast would be halfway to Mexico by now," he commented, noticing Thunderclap on the ridge. "He has his reasons for staying," Miguel said. Elijah gave him a skeptical look, then turned to Clara. "The creek's flowing strong. Wilcox's property line won't mean much with water that high." "Small mercies," Clara replied. She hadn't yet told her father about the kiss. Wasn't sure she would. Some things needed to remain private until they were better understood. By mid-morning, word of Thunderclap's freedom had spread to town. Curious onlookers began arriving at the ranch, ostensibly to check on storm damage but really to witness the famous wild Mustang roaming free, and to see if Vance Hollister would still attempt his boastful ride. Miguel disappeared shortly after breakfast, taking the hand-braided halter with him. Clara deliberately didn't ask where he was going. Some part of her understood that whatever happened between Miguel and Thunderclap needed to happen without an audience. At 11:30, with a small crowd gathered in the yard, Clara heard a collective gasp. She turned to see Miguel walking toward the ranch, and beside him, without rope or restraint, walked Thunderclap. The massive horse moved with deliberate steps, the simple halter around his head, no lead rope attached. He simply followed Miguel, matching his pace, stopping when he stopped. Not tamed, not broken, but choosing to accompany the man who had earned his trust. The sight stole Clara's breath. In 3 years, No one had been able to approach Thunderclap without him rearing or charging. Now he walked like a shadow beside Miguel, his movements fluid and unforced. As they entered the yard, the onlookers stepped back instinctively, creating a path. Thunderclap's eyes rolled nervously at the crowd, but he stayed with Miguel, drawn by something stronger than fear. "How did you?" Clara began when they reached her. Miguel shook his head slightly. "I didn't do anything," he decided. "That's not possible," one of the townsmen muttered. "Horse that size, that wild must have drugged it somehow." Miguel ignored the comment, his focus on Clara. "He came when I called, accepted the halter freely." Clara reached out a tentative hand. Thunderclap snorted but didn't pull away when her fingers brushed his velvet nose. The first time he had ever allowed her to touch him. "My mother was right about you," she whispered to the horse. "She saw something special." The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Vance Hollister and his friends rode into the yard, their expressions shifting from confidence to disbelief at the sight of the unconstrained Thunderclap standing calmly beside Miguel. "Well, I'll be damned," Vance said, dismounting slowly. "You actually broke him." "No," Miguel replied. "I understood him." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Our bet still stands. $20 says I can ride him." "There was no bet," Clara interjected. "And circumstances have changed." "Have they?" Vance stepped closer, studying Thunderclap with a mixture of caution and calculation. "Looks to me like the Indian proved my point. The horse can be ridden. Just needs the right approach." "Mr. Reyes hasn't ridden him," Clara pointed out. "Haven't you?" Vance challenged Miguel directly. The gathered crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. Even Clara found herself waiting for Miguel's answer, realizing she didn't know if he had tried to mount Thunderclap during their private time together. Miguel's expression remained calm. "What exists between this horse and me isn't about riding or being ridden." "Sounds like fancy talk for no," Vance smirked. "Well, if you're afraid to try, I'm still willing." Clara stepped between Vance and Miguel. "This has gone far enough. There is no bet, no ride, and no need to prove anything." "Oh, there's plenty to prove," Vance insisted, his pride visible in the flush creeping up his neck. "Like whether your Indian friend here has some special powers, or if he's just been putting on a show." The crowd murmured, clearly intrigued by the confrontation. Clara noticed Harmon Wilcox among them, watching with calculated interest from atop his buggy. "Mr. Hollister," Miguel said quietly, "a horse is not a challenge to be conquered." "That's where you're wrong," Vance replied. "A wild horse is exactly that, a test of a man's skill and courage." He turned to the onlookers. "Folks here want to see if all that Apache mumbo-jumbo works better than good old-fashioned horsemanship." Clara felt the situation slipping beyond her control. The gathered townspeople were nodding in agreement, clearly anticipating the spectacle of Vance attempting to ride the notorious Mustang. "This is still my ranch," she said firmly. "And I say, let him try," Miguel interrupted. Clara turned to him in surprise. "What?" Miguel's eyes met hers, calm and certain. "If Mr. Hollister wishes to test his methods against mine, he should have that opportunity." Thunderclap stood quietly beside them, his massive head raised, ears flicking back and forth as if following the conversation. When Miguel spoke, the horse turned toward him attentively. "You can't be serious," Clara said in a low voice. "You know what Thunderclap can do to a man." "I also know what a man can do to a horse," Miguel replied softly. "Some lessons must be learned directly." Vance grinned triumphantly. "Smart Indian. Double the bet." "No money," Miguel said. "Just understanding." Vance shrugged. "Fine by me. I'll still take the glory of being the first to ride the Blackwood Devil." He removed his hat and jacket, handing them to one of his friends. "Need a saddle?" "Your choice," Miguel replied. Clara watched with growing apprehension as Vance's friends fetched a saddle from his horse. The crowd formed a loose circle, excitement building. Even her father had emerged from the house to witness the event. "Miguel," she said quietly, "this is madness. Thunderclap will kill him." Thunderclap will protect himself, Miguel corrected, as is his right. As Vance approached with the saddle, Thunderclap shifted nervously but remained in place. Miguel spoke softly to the horse in Apache, his hand resting lightly on the Mustang's powerful neck. "Step aside, Indian," Vance said, saddle in hand. "Let's see if this devil remembers proper training." Miguel gave Thunderclap one final pat, then moved away, joining Clara at the edge of the circle. The great horse watched him go, then turned his attention to Vance, nostrils flaring at the scent of whiskey and bravado. "Shouldn't we stop this?" Clara whispered. "Sometimes the only way to prove water is hot is to let someone touch it," Miguel replied enigmatically. Vance approached Thunderclap with exaggerated confidence, speaking loudly for the benefit of the audience. "See, folks? Nothing special about this horse. Just needs a man with real skills." He reached toward Thunderclap's back with the saddle. The Mustang's reaction was instantaneous. He reared up, front hooves pawing the air, forcing Vance to stumble backward. The crowd gasped, several people retreating further. "Whoa there!" Vance shouted, dropping the saddle and grabbing for the halter. "Settle down, you devil!" Thunderclap came down hard, barely missing Vance's foot. The horse snorted, tossing his great head, but surprisingly didn't bolt or charge. Instead, he stood his ground, eyes rolling, clearly agitated but not panicked. "Just needs a firm hand," Vance insisted, reaching again for the halter. This time he managed to grab it, yanking Thunderclap's head down with unnecessary force. "See? Control." The Mustang's patience ended. With a movement almost too quick to follow, he spun away from Vance, breaking the man's grip on the halter. As Vance lunged after him, Thunderclap kicked out with his hind legs, not making contact but sending a clear warning. "Damn beast!" Vance shouted, face reddening with embarrassment as the crowd murmured. He picked up a coiled rope from the ground. "I'll show you who's in charge." Before anyone could intervene, Vance swung the rope at Thunderclap like a whip. The Mustang dodged the blow and bolted across the yard, powerful muscles bunching as he ran. Rather than fleeing the ranch, however, he circled back toward Miguel, stopping several yards away, sides heaving. Vance started after him, but Clara stepped into his path. "That's enough. You've proven nothing except your own foolishness. Get out of my way," Vance growled. "I'm not finished with that horse." "Yes, you are," Clara replied firmly. "You've had your chance. Now leave my property." For a moment, Vance looked ready to argue further, but the collective gaze of the crowd seemed to penetrate his anger. With a muttered curse, he snatched his hat and jacket from his friend. "Keep your devil horse," he spat. "But everybody here saw how your Indian friend wouldn't even try to ride it himself. All talk and no action." As Vance and his friends mounted up to leave, Miguel walked calmly to where Thunderclap waited. The horse lowered his head as Miguel approached, allowing him to stroke his neck. The contrast between the Mustang's response to the two men was unmistakable, and not lost on the watching crowd. "Perhaps," Miguel said, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "riding is not the only measure of understanding." Once Vance had departed, the spectators began to disperse, conversation buzzing about what they'd witnessed. Clara overheard fragments, some claiming Miguel had used Indian magic, others admitting there might be something to his gentler methods. Harmon Wilcox remained, observing from his buggy. When Clara noticed him, he tipped his hat with mock politeness. "Quite a show, my dear," he called. "Though I notice your miraculous horse whisperer didn't actually ride the beast either." "That wasn't the point," Clara replied. "Wasn't it?" Harmon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Remember, 29 days until your loan comes due. All the horse tricks in the world won't change that." After Harmon's departure, Clara found herself alone with Miguel and Thunderclap in the yard. The giant Mustang remained near Miguel, occasionally nudging his shoulder with surprising gentleness for such a powerful animal. "Why did you let Vance try?" Clara asked. "You knew what would happen." "He needed to learn," Miguel replied, "and others needed to see." "See what? That Thunderclap can't be broken." Miguel shook his head. That forcing submission creates resistance. That trust must be earned, not demanded. Clara studied him. This quiet man who had transformed the ranch's most dangerous liability into something approaching an asset. In just a few weeks, he had accomplished what 3 years of conventional approaches had failed to do. "You still haven't tried to ride him," she observed. "The time wasn't right," Miguel said simply. He ran a hand along Thunderclap's powerful neck. "A partnership has its own pace." They walked together toward the barn, Thunderclap following without restraint. Inside, Clara found herself reaching for a pencil and paper, sketching the outline of man and horse standing side by side. Her mother had been the artist in the family, filling journals with drawings of the ranch and its animals. Clara had never felt the urge until now. "I should check the northern pasture," Miguel said, watching her draw. "The storm may have damaged the fencing there." Clara nodded, adding a few more lines to her sketch. "Take Pete with you. After what happened with Vance, I don't want anyone riding alone." Miguel's expression grew serious, especially with rustlers active. "They'll see the confusion after the storm as an opportunity." "You sound like you've dealt with rustlers before," Clara remarked. Miguel was quiet for a moment. "I worked as a scout for the cavalry at Fort Apache. Tracking was part of my duties." Clara set down her pencil. "Is that why there's a wanted poster with your name on it?" "Yes," Miguel said, "though the charges are false." "What happened?" Miguel touched the medicine pouch at his chest, a gesture Clara had come to recognize as his way of gathering thoughts. "A band of rustlers hit the fort's horse corrals," he began. "I tracked them into the mountains. When I returned to report their location, I found the commander had been replaced. The new officer was unfriendly to those with Apache blood. He blamed you for the theft," Clara guessed. "He needed someone to blame," Miguel corrected. "I was convenient. When I protested, I was given a choice: face a hanging or disappear. So you disappeared. Until now." His eyes met hers. "Your sheriff recognized me from the poster." Clara absorbed this information, understanding its implications. "Harmon will use this against you, against us." "Likely," Miguel agreed. "But truth has its own power." Clara found herself reaching for his hand, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. "We'll figure it out. Together." The touch lingered, neither pulling away until Thunderclap nudged between them, snorting as if impatient with human complications. The interruption made them both smile, breaking the tension of the moment. "He's jealous," Clara joked. "He's hungry," Miguel corrected, though his eyes held warmth as they met hers. Later that afternoon, Clara found her father in his study, surprisingly sober and focused as he sorted through old papers. The room smelled less of whiskey and more of dust and leather, a welcome change. "Looking for something?" she asked from the doorway. Elijah glanced up, his face showing more animation than she'd seen in months. "That old cavalry map your grandfather used. Thought it might be in here somewhere." "What do you need it for?" "Been thinking about those rustlers," her father said, returning to his search. "They're hitting specific sections of range, taking only a few head at a time. Too organized to be random drifters." Clara entered the room, helping him sort through the stacks of documents. "You think they're using the old canyon trails?" "Makes sense. Those paths don't appear on newer maps. Perfect for moving stolen cattle without being seen." Working together, they eventually found the yellowed map tucked inside an ancient ledger. Elijah spread it on the desk, the paper crackling with age. The map showed the surrounding territory in faded ink, including narrow passages through the hills that had long fallen out of common use. "Here," Elijah pointed to a winding line through the northern section of their property. "This canyon connects to the old military road, narrow enough that 2 men could hold off a dozen, but wide enough for cattle." Clara studied the map with growing interest. "If the rustlers are using this route, we could catch them in the act," her father finished, a spark of his old strategist's mind showing through. "But we'd need to know when they're coming. And we'd need men we could trust," Clara added. Many of the ranch hands were temporary hires, their loyalties uncertain. Miguel appeared in the doorway, having returned from checking the pastures. Found tracks, he reported. Fresh ones, heading north from where we lost the 2 steers last week. Clara beckoned him into the study. We found something too. She gestured to the map. An old trail that might explain how the rustlers are operating. Miguel examined the map with careful attention, his finger tracing the canyon route. This would be perfect for their purpose. Easily defended, hidden from view, with multiple exit points. You have experience with this kind of terrain? Elijah asked, watching Miguel closely. Yes, Miguel replied simply. Both tracking and being tracked. Clara explained Miguel's cavalry background to her father, including the false charges against him. Elijah absorbed this information with a thoughtful frown. So Harmon and the sheriff have a weapon against you, he observed. And by extension, against this ranch. It appears so, Miguel agreed. Elijah's expression hardened with resolve Clara hadn't seen in years. Then we'll need to disarm them. The best defense is a successful offense. What are you suggesting? Clara asked. That we catch these rustlers red-handed, Elijah replied. Prove they're operating in our territory. And if my suspicions are correct, we might find a connection to certain respectable citizens of Copper Creek. Harmon, Clara said, the pieces falling into place. Her father nodded grimly. Always follow the money. Who benefits most from weakening our position? Who has the connections to move stolen cattle without questions? And who has been systematically acquiring distressed properties throughout the county? Clara added, anger building at the scope of Harmon's possible schemes. Miguel's expression remained calm, but his eyes had taken on the focused intensity Clara had glimpsed when he tracked lost cattle. If we're right, we'll need evidence strong enough to convince even a friendly sheriff. The next morning, Clara rode into town with a purpose that had nothing to do with supplies. She dressed with care, not in her usual practical riding clothes, but in the blue dress her mother had made for her last birthday. If she was going to play Harmon's game, she needed every advantage. The bank was quiet when she entered. Only a clerk and a single customer conducting business. Clara waited patiently, hat in hands, until the customer departed. Then she approached the clerk with her most pleasant smile. Good morning, Walter. Is Mr. Wilcox available? Walter, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, blinked in surprise. I believe so, Miss Blackwood. Shall I tell him you're here? Please do. Tell him I've reconsidered his offer. A few minutes later, Clara sat across from Harmon in his private office. He looked pleased but cautious, like a fox scenting a trap. This is an unexpected pleasure, he said. Offering her coffee, she declined. Walter mentioned something about reconsidering? The loan, Clara replied, forcing warmth into her voice. You were right, Harmon. I've been foolishly stubborn. Harmon's eyebrows rose slightly. Have you now? What changed your mind? The storm, Clara improvised. It showed me how quickly circumstances can turn. One day drought, the next flooding. It made me think about security. Security, Harmon repeated, savoring the word. Precisely what I've been offering all along. Clara lowered her eyes demurely. I know. I should have listened sooner. Better late than never, my dear. Harmon leaned forward, excitement poorly concealed beneath his professional demeanor. So you're prepared to sign over the deed? I'd like to see the papers first, Clara said, to understand exactly what I'm agreeing to. Harmon hesitated briefly, then reached into his desk drawer. I've had these prepared for some time. Just a standard transfer of ownership, all quite above board. The document he placed before her was far from standard. Clara scanned it quickly, rage building beneath her calm exterior. The deed transfer listed not just the current loan amount but additional administrative fees that nearly doubled the debt. Worse, a clause buried in the legal language granted Harmon immediate rights to all livestock on the property, including the right to remove them at his discretion. This seems comprehensive, she managed to say, fighting to keep her voice steady. Simply protecting the bank's interests, Harmon replied smoothly. And yours, of course. Once you sign, all your financial worries disappear. Along with my ranch, Clara observed, unable to completely mask her bitterness. Harmon's smile tightened. You'd retain residence rights for 6 months. Ample time to adjust your circumstances. Clara pretended to consider the document further while her mind raced. The agreement was worse than she'd imagined. Not just foreclosure but immediate theft of their remaining assets. If they signed this, they'd lose everything overnight. Could I take this home to discuss with my father? She asked, injecting a note of helpless femininity into her voice. Harmon's expression softened with patronizing indulgence. Of course, my dear, though I should mention that Sheriff Mills was asking about your new foreman again this morning. Most concerned about those theft charges from Arizona. The threat was barely veiled. Clara maintained her composure with effort. I'll be sure to mention that to my father as well. As she rose to leave, document in hand, a flash of white caught her eye. A ledger on Harmon's desk, partially covered by other papers. What made her pause was the familiar brand symbol at the top of a visible column, the rocking M from the Michaels Ranch north of town. Harmon noticed her gaze and casually covered the ledger with other papers. Will you be returning tomorrow with your decision? Count on it, Clara replied, her suspicions deepening. Outside the bank, Clara took a moment to collect herself, the forged deed clutched in her hand. The document was proof of Harmon's intent but not of his connection to the rustlers. For that, she needed what was in that ledger, records of cattle sales that would almost certainly include stolen Blackwood stock. Back at the ranch, she found Miguel and her father in serious conversation with Pete. The men fell silent as she entered, exchanging glances that told her they'd been discussing plans they weren't sure she'd approve. What is it? She demanded, dropping the fraudulent deed on the table. Tracks, Pete replied grimly. Found fresh ones this morning along the North Ridge. They're moving cattle through exactly where your father predicted. And there's more, Miguel added. I found this hidden in a saddlebag in the bunkhouse. He placed a folded paper on the table beside Harmon's deed. Clara opened it to find a roughly drawn map of Blackwood Ranch with specific locations marked, including their best grazing areas and the canyon route from the old cavalry map. Whose saddlebag? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Jim Davis, Pete said. Hired on 3 weeks ago. Keeps to himself. Rides out alone whenever he can. A spy, Clara's father said flatly. Feeding information to the rustlers. Or one of them, Miguel suggested. The map shows planned routes for moving larger herds than what's been taken so far. Clara shared what she'd discovered at the bank, the suspicious ledger and the outrageous terms of Harmon's deed. He's planning to clean us out completely, she concluded. Not just foreclosure, but immediate seizure of all our cattle, and likely using the rustlers to weaken us beforehand. Her father added, studying the documents. Taking just enough to strain us without raising too many suspicions. But why the elaborate scheme? Pete wondered. Why not just foreclose and be done with it? Because legally he can only claim what's owed, Clara's father explained. This way he gets everything, land, buildings, livestock, at a fraction of its value. Miguel had been examining the spy's map closely. According to this, they're planning something big. Tomorrow night, using the canyon during the new moon. Clara felt cold certainty settle in her stomach. That's when our loan officially defaults. Harmon wants me to bring him the signed deed tomorrow. If we don't, he'll have the sheriff arrest Miguel and then clean out our herd under cover of darkness. Then we need to be ready, her father said with newfound determination. If we can catch them in the act, with evidence linking them to Harmon. It's dangerous, Clara warned. These men won't surrender quietly. Neither will we, Miguel said quietly. His hand rested lightly on the table near Clara's, not quite touching but offering silent support. We have one advantage they don't expect. What's that? Pete asked. Miguel's expression held the calm certainty that had drawn Clara to him from the beginning. They think we're already beaten. Under the cover of routine ranch work, preparations for the confrontation with the rustlers proceeded throughout the day. Pete quietly identified the hands they could trust, only 5 out of the current 8. Clara's father, revitalized by purpose, retrieved his old cavalry pistol from its locked chest and cleaned it with practiced hands. As evening approached, Clara found Miguel at the edge of the ranch yard, sitting cross-legged on the ground while Thunderclap grazed nearby. The massive horse had remained on Blackwood land despite his freedom, always within sight of the buildings, often shadowing Miguel's movements from a distance. "We need to talk about tomorrow," Clara said, joining Miguel on the ground. "About your role in this." Miguel looked at her steadily. "You're worried." "Of course I'm worried. We're about to confront armed rustlers in a narrow canyon, and the sheriff won't help us even if he believed us." "Which he won't," Miguel agreed. "Not without proof." Clara picked at a blade of grass, twisting it between her fingers. "There's something else. The wanted poster with your name on it. If anything happens tomorrow, you could be blamed. It's the perfect opportunity for Harmon to have you arrested, or worse." Miguel reached into his shirt and removed his medicine pouch, a small leather bag worn smooth by years of handling. He loosened the drawstring and extracted a gleaming object, a cavalry knife with a bone handle, etched with a symbol Clara didn't recognize. "My grandfather's," Miguel explained, "given to him by an officer whose life he saved. He told me it would protect me when I needed it most." Clara studied the blade. "Is that what you're counting on tomorrow? Protection from a knife?" Miguel smiled slightly. "No, I'm counting on truth. And on Thunderclap." "Thunderclap?" Clara frowned in confusion. "What does he have to do with this?" "Tomorrow I'll ride him into the canyon." The statement, delivered so matter-of-factly, stunned Clara into momentary silence. "You've never even sat on his back," she finally managed. "Not where you could see," Miguel corrected gently. Understanding dawned. "Last night, during the storm, that's where you disappeared to." Miguel nodded. "He came to me, offered his back freely. We rode to the ridge and back, no saddle, no bit. Just trust." Clara tried to imagine it. This man and the untamable horse moving as one through the storm-washed night. Something about the image made her throat tighten with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Some things need to happen in their own time," Miguel replied, "without witnesses or expectations." Clara studied him. This man who had entered their lives so unexpectedly and changed everything with his quiet strength. The feelings she'd been fighting rose to the surface, demanding acknowledgement. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not just of tomorrow, but of this." She gestured between them. "Whatever is happening between us." Miguel took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "Fear is natural when something matters deeply. And if we fail tomorrow, if we lose everything, then we start again," he said simply. "With what remains." Clara found herself leaning toward him, drawn by the certainty in his voice. Their lips met in a kiss deeper than their first, a promise rather than a question. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. "I wish we had more time," she whispered. "We have now," Miguel replied. "The future will come regardless." They remained together as darkness fell, planning the next day's confrontation in low voices. Miguel would lead the main force through the canyon, while Clara and her father would position themselves on the ridge above with rifles. Pete and the trusted hands would create a blockade at the canyon's exit to trap the rustlers between them. "Once we have them contained," Miguel explained, "we need proof of Harmon's involvement. Papers, receipts, anything connecting him to the stolen cattle." "And if we don't find it?" Clara asked. "Then we bring them in anyway," her father interjected, joining them with a map in hand. "At least we'll stop the bleeding, even if we can't prove who's holding the knife." As the three of them finalized their strategy, Thunderclap wandered closer, massive head lowered to graze near Miguel's shoulder. The horse's presence seemed protective, as if he understood the gravity of their discussion. "Will he come when you call tomorrow?" Clara's father asked, eyeing the Mustang with newfound respect. "He'll come," Miguel said with certainty. Later that night, Clara couldn't sleep. She paced her room, mind racing with all the ways their plan could fail. The stakes were impossibly high. Not just the ranch, but Miguel's freedom, perhaps even their lives if the rustlers were as dangerous as they suspected. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find Miguel, his expression solemn in the lamplight. "I heard you walking," he said. "Thought you might want company." Clara let him in, suddenly aware of her nightdress and loose hair. The impropriety would have scandalized her a month ago. Now it seemed trivial compared to what they faced. "I keep thinking about what happens if we're wrong," she admitted. "If Harmon isn't connected to the rustlers. If we're facing charges instead of them." Miguel moved to the window, looking out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. "We're not wrong. But even if we were, doing nothing guarantees loss." Clara joined him at the window. Beyond the yard, Thunderclap's massive form was visible, a darker shadow against the night. The horse stood sentinel-like, facing the northern hills where danger would come. "He knows something's happening," Miguel observed. "Can he really sense that?" Clara asked. "Animals understand more than we credit them for," Miguel replied, unconsciously echoing Clara's mother's words. "They feel the currents of intention." Clara touched the knife Miguel had shown her earlier, now strapped to his belt. "Your grandfather's protection. And this?" Miguel added, pulling something from his pocket. A small bundle wrapped in soft leather. He unwrapped it to reveal a carved wooden horse, perfectly capturing Thunderclap's proud stance despite its small size. "You made this?" Clara asked, taking the figurine with careful hands. Miguel nodded. "For you. Whatever happens tomorrow, this is a reminder that some bonds can't be broken by outside forces." Clara felt tears threaten at the simple beauty of the gift. "Thank you." As Miguel prepared to leave, Clara caught his hand. "Stay," she said softly. "Just to talk. I don't want to be alone tonight." Miguel nodded, understanding in his eyes. They sat together on the edge of her bed, speaking in low voices about their lives before meeting, about dreams deferred, about the futures they might create if tomorrow went well. No promises were made beyond the moment, yet Clara felt something settling between them, a foundation being built one shared glance at a time. Dawn arrived with the quiet inevitability of fate. Clara rose from where she'd fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, Miguel having departed hours earlier after their long conversation. The wooden horse figurine sat on her nightstand, a tangible reminder of what they stood to lose and what they might gain. The day passed with excruciating slowness. To maintain the appearance of normalcy, everyone went about their regular chores. Pete kept Jim Davis, their suspected spy, busy with tasks far from the preparations. Clara rode into town as planned, the forged deed in her saddlebag, to meet with Harmon. "I've reviewed the documents," she told him in his office, forcing a defeated tone into her voice. "My father agrees we have no choice but to accept your terms." Harmon barely contained his triumph. "A wise decision, my dear. Shall we complete the transaction now?" "My father insists on being present for the final signing," Clara improvised. "His pride, you understand. Could you come to the ranch this evening? Around 8. Harmon frowned slightly. "That's rather unusual. Bank business is normally conducted at the bank." "It's his final request," Clara pressed, allowing a tremor in her voice, "to sign away his life's work in his own home. Surely you can grant him that dignity?" After a calculated hesitation, Harmon nodded. "Very well. 8 o'clock." He reached for her hand, his fingers cold against her skin. "I assure you, Clara, you won't regret this decision. In time, you might even find happiness in our new arrangement." Clara suppressed a shudder, withdrawing her hand as politely as possible. 8 o'clock then. Back at the ranch, final preparations accelerated. Weapons were checked, horses readied, positions planned. Jim Davis was sent to a distant pasture on a fabricated errand that would keep him away until after dark. As the sun began its descent, Clara found Miguel at the corral, speaking softly to Thunderclap. The massive horse stood calmly as Miguel fitted him with the simple hand-braided halter. No bit, no saddle, just the most basic connection between man and animal. "Are you sure about this?" Clara asked, watching the gentle interaction between them. Miguel nodded. "He's ready. We both are." Clara touched the horse's powerful neck, still amazed that the animal that had terrorized the ranch for years now accepted human contact so easily. "Be careful with him," she said, though she wasn't certain whether she was speaking to Miguel about the horse or to Thunderclap about Miguel. "We'll protect each other," Miguel replied, understanding her concern. As dusk gathered, everyone moved to their assigned positions. Clara and her father took the high ground overlooking the canyon entrance, rifles ready. Pete and 3 trusted hands concealed themselves at the canyon's exit with ropes and more firearms. Miguel waited alone at the midpoint, Thunderclap hidden in a stand of juniper trees nearby. The new moon provided perfect cover for both rustlers and ambush. Stars scattered across the velvet sky, offering minimal light. Clara peered through the darkness, straining to hear any approach from the north. Beside her, her father checked his pistol for the 3rd time, his breathing steady but tense. "Here they come," he whispered finally, pointing to faint movement in the distance. Darker shapes against the night, moving slowly. Clara counted at least 6 riders guiding a small herd of cattle, perhaps 20 head. They moved with practiced efficiency, keeping the animals quiet as they approached the canyon entrance. Among them, she recognized Jim Davis's distinctive hat silhouette. "Steady," her father cautioned as she raised her rifle. "Let them get fully into the canyon. We need them all." The rustlers entered the narrow passage below, unaware of the trap closing around them. Clara held her breath, waiting for Miguel's signal, a single rifle shot to initiate the ambush. Instead, a new sound echoed through the night, hoofbeats approaching rapidly from the ranch direction. A lone rider appeared at the canyon entrance, silhouetted briefly against the starlit sky before plunging into the darkness after the rustlers. "Harmon," Clara whispered in alarm. "He's early," her father swore under his breath. "He must have suspected something. If he warns them." The rest of his sentence was cut off by shouts from below. The rustlers had spotted the approaching rider and were wheeling to confront him. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the scene. "Miguel's signal," Clara's father shouted, raising his own rifle and firing into the air. Chaos erupted in the canyon. The startled cattle began to mill and bellow, disrupting the rustlers' formation. From the exit end, Pete and the ranch hands charged forward, whooping and firing to drive the herd back toward the entrance. Clara aimed carefully at a rustler raising his gun toward the canyon wall where Miguel should be positioned, squeezing the trigger with steady hands. The man cried out and dropped his weapon. More gunfire echoed through the narrow space, making it impossible to track individual actions. Clara reloaded, heart pounding as she searched the melee for Miguel. Where was he? Had the early confrontation disrupted their plan? Her question was answered by a sound that chilled her blood, Thunderclap's distinctive whinny, followed by pounding hoofbeats. Through the dust and confusion below, a massive shape emerged. The giant Mustang at full charge, Miguel on his back, riding bareback with only the halter for control. The sight was magnificent and terrifying. Thunderclap moved like living thunder, his powerful body a weapon in itself as he scattered rustlers in his path. Miguel rode as if born to the horse's back, guiding with knees and voice rather than reins, the two of them functioning as a single devastating force. "My God!" Clara's father breathed beside her. "Would you look at that?" Below, one rustler raised his rifle toward Miguel. Clara fired without hesitation, her shot going wide but causing enough distraction for Thunderclap to close the distance. The horse reared, massive hooves flashing in the darkness, and the rustler went down beneath them. Through the dust and confusion, Clara saw Harmon's distinctive buggy at the canyon entrance. The banker himself crouched behind it, pistol drawn. As the tide of battle turned against the rustlers, he began a retreat toward town. "He's getting away," Clara shouted, already scrambling down from their position toward her waiting horse. "Clara, wait!" her father called, but she was already mounting up, determined not to let Harmon escape with his connection to the rustlers undiscovered. As she rode hard toward the canyon entrance, she caught glimpses of the battle still raging. Miguel and Thunderclap at the center of it, man and horse moving with impossible coordination, turning the rustlers' ambush into a trap of their own, making Clara urged her horse forward, following the retreating buggy through the night. Harmon had a head start, but his vehicle was hampered by the rough terrain while her gelding moved with sure-footed speed. Behind her, the sounds of the canyon battle faded as distance grew. Harmon glanced back, spotted her pursuit, and cracked his whip over his horse, accelerating toward town. Clara leaned low in the saddle, determined not to let him escape. The moonless night made the chase dangerous. Unseen rocks or holes could bring her mount down in an instant, but she trusted her horse and her knowledge of the land. The chase continued for nearly a mile before Clara closed the gap. As she drew alongside the buggy, Harmon raised his silver-handled pistol, the barrel glinting in the starlight. "Stop or I'll shoot," he shouted. Clara ducked lower but didn't slow. "You'll have to shoot me, Harmon. I'm not letting you go." He fired once, the shot going wide. Before he could aim again, Clara made a desperate move, leaping from her saddle onto the moving buggy. They struggled briefly, her momentum throwing them both off balance. The buggy swerved, struck a boulder, and overturned with a splintering crash. Clara found herself thrown clear, landing hard on rocky ground that knocked the breath from her lungs. Harmon wasn't as fortunate. His leg was trapped beneath the overturned vehicle, his face contorted in pain. "You've broken it," he gasped as Clara approached. "You crazy woman." Clara ignored his complaints, searching the scattered contents of the buggy. Among the debris, she found what she was looking for: a leather portfolio containing papers that had spilled across the ground. Gathering them quickly, she confirmed her suspicions. Receipts for cattle sales with altered brands, including Blackwood stock, and a list of payments to various men, including Jim Davis and Sheriff Mills. "This is enough to hang you," she told Harmon, clutching the evidence. Harmon's pain gave way to cold calculation. "You won't live to show those to anyone," he said, raising his pistol again from where he lay trapped. Before he could fire, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. Against the starlit sky, a massive silhouette appeared, Thunderclap at full gallop with Miguel on his back, riding like something from an ancient legend. Harmon fired at the approaching figures, but the shot went wild. As they drew closer, Miguel leapt from Thunderclap's back in a smooth motion, tackling Harmon and wresting the gun from his hand. The banker cried out as the movement jarred his trapped leg. "The others?" Clara asked breathlessly as Miguel secured Harmon with a length of rope from the broken buggy. "Captured," Miguel replied. "Your father and Pete are bringing them in. They're all alive, though 2 are wounded." Clara held up the documents. "We have proof. Harmon's been behind everything. The rustling, the foreclosures, all of it." Miguel nodded, unsurprised. "He wanted more than your ranch. He wanted everything." Thunderclap stood nearby, sides heaving from the exertion but otherwise calm despite the scent of blood and gunpowder that clung to them all. Clara approached the great horse with newfound respect, reaching out to touch his sweaty neck. "You were magnificent," she told him softly. "Both of you." As dawn broke over the eastern hills, a peculiar procession made its way into Copper Creek. Pete and the ranch hands drove the recovered cattle and led the captured rustlers, including a sullen Jim Davis. Clara's father followed with Harmon's buggy, hastily repaired enough to transport the banker and the evidence against him. Miguel and Clara rode side by side, with Thunderclap moving freely beside them like a massive guardian. The town stirred to life at their approach, citizens emerging from their homes to witness the spectacle. Sheriff Mills appeared on the jailhouse steps, his hand moving instinctively to his gun until he saw the size of the group and recognized his patron Harmon bound in his own buggy. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded. Clara's father dismounted, approaching with the portfolio of evidence. Rustling, fraud, conspiracy, just for starters, Sheriff. And here's the proof, including payments to your account. The sheriff's face paled. Now see here, Elijah. Save it for the circuit judge. Clara's father cut him off. He'll be mighty interested in how the local law enforcement has been supplementing his income. As the sheriff was relieved of his weapon and added to the collection of prisoners, townspeople gathered closer, murmuring in shock at the unfolding events. Clara noticed Mrs. Parker from the general store pointing at Thunderclap and whispering to her husband, eyes wide with amazement at the legendary wild horse now standing calmly in the middle of town. Vance Hollister pushed through the crowd, stopping short at the sight of Miguel seated comfortably on Thunderclap's bare back. The horse stood motionless, accepting Miguel's presence as if it were the most natural thing in the world. How? Vance began, unable to complete the question. Miguel didn't answer, simply resting his hand on Thunderclap's powerful neck in a gesture that spoke more eloquently than words. By mid-morning, a telegram had been sent to the territorial capital requesting a marshal and judge. The rustlers and their conspirators were locked in the jail under guard by ranch hands and deputized townsmen. Harmon's broken leg had been set by the local doctor, who confirmed it would heal but leave him with a permanent limp, a fitting reminder of his crimes. Clara found Miguel tending to Thunderclap behind the livery stable, washing trail dust from the horse's coat with gentle hands. The morning light revealed bruises on Miguel's face and a blood-stained tear in his shirt. "You're hurt," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Nothing serious," he assured her. Thunderclap took the worst of it. He indicated a long scratch across the horse's flank. "One of the rustlers had a knife." Clara examined the wound carefully. "It's not deep. He was lucky." "We all were," Miguel agreed. "Another minute and Harmon might have." Clara silenced him with a finger to his lips. "But he didn't. We won." Miguel caught her hand gently. "For now, there will be a trial. Questions about my past at Fort Apache. With Harmon's documents, we can prove the charges against you were false," Clara said with confidence she didn't entirely feel. The law was complicated, and Miguel's Apache heritage would count against him in many courts. "Perhaps," Miguel acknowledged. "But today is enough. Today we saved what matters." Clara leaned against him, drawing strength from his steadiness. "And tomorrow? Tomorrow we rebuild," he said simply. "One day at a time." The trial came and went like the summer storms. Intense, transformative, and eventually clearing to reveal a changed landscape. The territorial judge had been unmoved by Harmon's claims of respectability, especially when faced with his meticulous records of criminal activity. The banker received 10 years of hard labor, while Sheriff Mills and the rustlers earned varying sentences based on their involvement. Most importantly for Miguel, the charges from Fort Apache were formally dismissed when the new commander testified that his predecessor had indeed targeted employees with native blood without cause. Miguel was a free man in every sense of the word. 3 months after the canyon confrontation, Clara stood on the porch of the Blackwood Ranch house, watching the western sky turn gold with evening light. The land had recovered remarkably from the drought. Grass grew thick in the pastures, cattle had regained their flesh, and the repaired windmills pumped steady water from rejuvenated wells. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the ridge where a familiar silhouette appeared, Thunderclap with Miguel astride his back, returning from their daily ride. The massive horse moved with the fluid grace that had made him legendary, no longer contained by corral walls or human expectations. As they approached, Clara smiled at the sight that still amazed her. The gentle way Miguel rode without saddle or bridle, the horse responding to the slightest shift of weight or whispered word. Thunderclap had become the ranch's most valuable asset, his size and speed unmatched when working cattle or covering territory. "The north pasture looks good," Miguel reported as he slid from Thunderclap's back. "Grass is coming in thick where we receded." Clara nodded. "The bank messenger came while you were out. Our loan is officially transferred to the territorial bank in the capital. Harmon's replacement sends his assurances that they have no interest in foreclosure as long as we meet the regular payments." "Which we will," Miguel said with quiet confidence. The ranch's finances had stabilized with the recovery of their stolen cattle and the addition of new contracts with honest buyers. Thunderclap nudged Miguel's shoulder gently, then wandered toward the water trough, free to come and go as he pleased, yet choosing to remain close to the man who had earned his trust. "My father wants to speak with us," Clara said, taking Miguel's hand. "He's in the study." They found Elijah Blackwood at his desk, looking more like his old self than he had in years. Sobriety had returned color to his face and clarity to his eyes. Before him lay the deed to the ranch and his old wooden sobriety token, which hadn't left his pocket since the night of the canyon battle. "Sit down, both of you," he said, gesturing to the chairs opposite his desk. "I've made a decision I want to share." Clara felt a flutter of anxiety, but her father's calm expression reassured her. "I'm putting the ranch in your name, Clara," he said without preamble. "Effective immediately." "Father," she began, but he raised a hand to stop her. "It's past time," he continued. "You've been running this place for years while I hid in a bottle. What happened with Harmon proved I'm not fit to hold the reins." "You've changed," Clara protested. "You're sober now." "Yes," Elijah agreed, "and I intend to stay that way. But this ranch belongs to you. It always has, in spirit if not in law. Your mother would agree." He turned to Miguel. "As for you, young man, I've watched how you work, how you think, how you treat my daughter. I'd be honored if you would consider staying on permanently, not just as foreman but as a partner in the operation." Miguel's expression remained composed, but Clara saw the emotion in his eyes. "I'm grateful for the offer, sir, but I think that decision should ultimately be Clara's." Elijah smiled. "I thought you might say that." He stood, gathering the deed and his token. "I'll leave you two to discuss it. I promised Pete I'd help him with the new foal anyway." After her father left, Clara moved to the window, looking out at Thunderclap grazing peacefully in the yard. "Partner in the operation," she repeated softly. "Is that what you want to be, Miguel?" He joined her at the window, his presence steady and reassuring as always. "I want to be wherever you are," he said simply. "Whatever that means." Clara turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "It could mean a great many things. Husband, for instance." Miguel's eyes widened slightly, the most surprise she'd ever seen him display. "Are you asking me to marry you, Clara Blackwood?" "I believe I am," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Unless you have objections." Instead of answering immediately, Miguel led her outside to where Thunderclap grazed. The great horse raised his head as they approached, eyes intelligent and assessing. "When I first came here," Miguel said, "I saw two spirits trapped by circumstances and expectations, you and this horse, both powerful, both misunderstood." Clara smiled at the comparison. "And now I see two spirits who have found their freedom." Miguel touched Thunderclap's nose gently, then Clara's cheek with the same reverence. "I would be honored to join my path with yours, if that's truly what you want." "It is," Clara said with certainty. As if understanding the significance of the moment, Thunderclap nudged them both with his massive head, nearly knocking them off balance. They laughed, steadying each other with natural ease. "I think he approves," Clara said. "He should," Miguel replied with the hint of a smile. "He brought us together." The setting sun cast long shadows across Blackwood Ranch as Clara and Miguel walked hand in hand toward the house, Thunderclap following a few paces behind. The land stretched around them, renewed and thriving, much like the people who tended it. Clara thought of her mother's journal with its sketches of wild horses and wisdom about patience. Sarah Blackwood had known something that Clara was only now beginning to understand, that the most valuable things in life couldn't be forced or controlled, only invited and nurtured. "Don't touch that giant Mustang," she had warned Miguel on his first day. Now that same Mustang was family, as inseparable from their story as the land itself. Some warnings, Clara reflected, were meant to be challenged, and some wild things were meant to be free, including the human heart.